No money, no power. Only a heart full of love, but that heart would soon shock a billionaire. Emma sat on the cracked city bench, her hands trembling around a worn envelope, while the world hustled past her like she didn't exist. Across the street, sleek black cars glinted under the noon sun. One carrying Alex Carter, the billionaire whose name alone made headlines, whose power bent businesses to his will, and whose fortune could buy the world many times over. He was observing her. But why did a man with everything care about someone with nothing? Her coat was threadbare, shoes scuffed, and yet, as a stray dog limped toward her, she instinctively offered her sandwich, her eyes soft with a warmth no money could measure. A passerby scoffed at her act, but Alex's gaze lingered. That small gesture, that simple and guarded moment of love, stirred something he hadn't felt in years. Emma didn't notice him, but the hum of the city seemed to fade when Alex stepped from his car. In a tailored charcoal suit, he moved with a calm authority, sunglasses reflecting the glaring sun. To the world, he was untouchable. Boardrooms bowed to his decisions, executives trembled at his directives, and media outlets chased his every move. But as he watched Emma, the woman with nothing, something inside him shifted. Emma clutched the envelope, a letter she had received that morning, informing her that her modest apartment would be reclaimed in 2 days. She had no family to help, no savings to fall back on. Memories of past betrayal flickered across her mind. Derek, her ex-fiancé, the man who had promised love but had stolen her tuition money, leaving her heartbroken and alone. She shivered at the memory of the night she discovered his deceit, the icy sting of loss, and the empty apartment where hope once lived. A voice beside her broke her reverie. "Excuse me, are you all right?" It was soft, but carried the confidence of someone used to command. She looked up to see a young woman from the cafe she often worked at, holding a cup of tea. "You look like you haven't eaten properly," the woman added, concern in her eyes. Emma smiled faintly. "Thank you. It's nothing. Just one of those days." She adjusted the envelope on her lap, unaware that Alex had noted every detail: the nervous fingers, the careful handling of something valuable yet fragile. Flashbacks returned. And bitten, her mother teaching her, as a child, that true love is giving without expecting. True power is kindness when no one is watching. Her father, gone too soon, had left behind a small journal filled with lessons in resilience and empathy. And it had been these lessons that had carried her through betrayal, poverty, and rejection. Alex's attention sharpened. In his world of wealth and influence, people acted for gain or fear. But Emma's kindness was incalculated, instinctive, and raw. She had no money, no power, yet her heart radiated something he had long forgotten existed in the world he dominated. As the stray dog nudged her hand for another bite, Emma whispered, "Here. It's all I have." Her voice trembled with both fatigue and sincerity. Alex stepped closer, hesitating, torn between the invisible barrier of wealth and the magnetic pull of humanity he could not ignore. Why did a girl with nothing capture the gaze of a man with everything? What was it about her heart that could shock someone used to controlling fortunes? And what would happen when these two worlds, one defined by love, one defined by power, finally collided? Emma trudged along the uneven pavement, her bag heavy with groceries and the weight of unpaid bills pressing against her chest. The sun reflected off glass towers nearby, a harsh reminder that the city thrived on wealth she would never touch. Her shoes scuffed along the cracks, and she paused for a moment to rest on the edge of a fountain, the trickling water echoing her tired heartbeat. She opened the envelope again, scanning the formal eviction notice that promised no mercy, no delay. She closed her eyes, a memory flickering in her mind: her mother kneeling beside a younger Emma, tucking a threadbare blanket around her shoulders during a winter that had claimed too many things. True love, her mother had whispered, is giving, even when the world takes everything. Emma's eyes snapped open as she noticed a group of businessmen laughing in sleek suits, their steps confident, their watches glinting in the sunlight. Among them, Alex Carter's presence lingered like a shadow she couldn't see, yet somehow felt. She remembered snippets of rumors about him, the billionaire who bought companies in a day, the man whose opinion could shutter factories, whose empire sprawled across continents. He had wealth, influence, everything. And yet, as she glanced at the glass tower that bore his name, she felt an inexplicable pull, a foreshadowing she could not name. She paused at a street corner where a child's balloon had floated away. the string curling around a rusted lamppost. Emma's heart tightened. She remembered her own childhood, the small joys she had clutched, the tiny victories she had celebrated with laughter, now long replaced by survival and solitude. She tugged at the balloon, letting the child retrieve it with a grateful smile. Her heart lifted briefly, though hunger gnawed and the envelope's warning weighed heavily. "It's all I can do," she murmured to herself, "all I have left." Across the street, Alex watched silently from his black SUV. He adjusted his cufflinks, noting the girl who moved with careful intent, offering kindness without hesitation, as though her actions were her currency. A flashback surfaced, a meeting 5 years ago where he had trusted someone blindly, only to have that trust shattered by greed and betrayal. The memory hardened him, and yet Emma's simplicity, her lack of pretense, her instinctive compassion pierced the armor he had built around himself. He glanced at the golden envelope she carried, curiosity ignited. What had drawn her to this moment? What made someone with nothing radiate such power of heart? Emma continued her walk, pausing briefly outside the cafe where she had worked for the past 6 months. She exchanged a small nod with the barista who handed her a discarded cup of coffee, the gesture warm and familiar. "You're out early," he joked softly. "Or late, depending on how you see it." She smiled faintly, her mind elsewhere, and replied, "Just trying to make it through today." A tiny and no-distracted glance at a stray cat lingering by the door. A whispered encouragement to a child playing nearby cemented the unseen connection with Alex, who had been watching and observed. The streets narrowed, and Emma's steps slowed. Each motion carried her back to lessons from her father, the man who had taught her resilience in the face of loss, who had died too soon, leaving behind a journal of guidance, of courage, of unshakable integrity. She ran a finger along the worn cover, remembering the inked words, "Power is fleeting. Love endures." The memory intertwined with the envelope she now held. It was a foreshadowing she could not yet comprehend, a seed of what was to come. Alex finally stepped from the SUV, brushing past a valet who bowed in recognition. His gaze never left Emma as he walked toward a small, quiet park bench ahead. He hesitated, the briefest shadow of doubt crossing his face. Wealth had taught him control, yet here was a force beyond his understanding, a powerless heart capable of shocking a man with everything. "Excuse me," he called softly, testing the waters of human connection he hadn't navigated in years. Emma glanced up, startled, and for a heartbeat, the city's chaos faded. Emma's footsteps echoed against the uneven cobblestones as she approached the corner where her favorite little bookshop stood. Its windows were dusty, the paint peeling, but inside, warmth and stories awaited those willing to lose themselves in another world. She paused outside, her fingers brushing the faded sign, thinking of the afternoons she had spent there as a child with her father. He had read to her by the window every weekend, whispering stories of faraway lands, of heroes who had nothing yet changed the world. Those tales had stayed with her, shaping a heart that refused to harden even when life had stripped away everything else. She pushed the door open, the bell tinkling softly. The owner, an elderly man with spectacles sliding down his nose, looked up. "Emma," he greeted, voice warm. "You're earlier than usual." "Morning, Mr. Harris," she said, offering a small smile. "I just needed a moment." Her gaze fell on a display of postcards. One showed a gilded mansion surrounded by manicured lawns. For a second, she imagined herself there, laughing, wearing a dress she could never afford, sharing her love freely, and burdened by hunger or debt. Across the street, Alex lingered near the SUV, watching. He hadn't moved since his first tentative approach, his instincts telling him that Emma was unaware of the storm she had just walked into. He recalled his own childhood, his father, a hard man who ruled the family empire with iron precision, teaching Alex to calculate every relationship in terms of profit, influence, and control. But here was Emma, moving through life with no calculation, no armor, yet leaving ripples of effect wherever she went. That unpredictability intrigued him. Emma crouched to tie her shoelace, and the envelope fell from her bag. She gasped, retrieving it quickly, heart pounding. It reminded her of Derek's betrayal all over again. He had taken everything she'd worked for, promising to return it soon but vanishing instead. The memory burned. She remembered the cold apartment, the empty cupboards, and her own tears soaking her pillow. Yet even as anger and despair surged, she whispered the lesson her mother had engraved in her soul, even in loss. Give what love you can. Alex shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly. Noting the delicate way she handled the envelope, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the weariness in her eyes. He leaned against the SUV, folding his arms. His assistant had warned him, "She's just another poor girl, boss. Don't get distracted." But Alex felt something deeper in unspoken magnetism. He had tested countless people for loyalty, kindness, and courage. Yet he had never encountered someone whose heart could radiate so much while carrying so little. Inside the bookshop, Emma selected a novel from the shelf, running her fingers along the spine. "I remember reading this with my dad," she murmured softly, a flicker of a smile crossing her face. Mr. Harris glanced at her, nodding knowingly, as though he understood the layers beneath her quiet exterior. As she turned toward the counter, a small child outside dropped a toy. Instinctively, Emma stepped back, scooping it up, and handed it to him. "Be careful next time, okay?" she said gently. Alex's gaze followed the motion, fascination growing. This was the thread that tied her together: no money, no power, only love, and yet that love commanded attention even in silence. Why did a girl who seemed so powerless wield a force so potent it could pierce through walls of wealth and authority? What unseen strength had carried her through betrayal and hunger? And what would happen when the man with everything finally crossed the threshold into her world? Emma stepped out of the bookshop with the worn novel clutched to her chest, the envelope still tucked safely in her bag. The midday sun beat down on the crowded sidewalk, but she barely noticed the heat. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying her father's voice: "Love is never powerless, even when the world says it is." He had taught her not just to give, but to protect what mattered, to stand firm when betrayal threatened, and to let compassion guide her actions. That lesson had carried her through Derek's deception, through eviction notices, through nights spent in drafty apartments with only her resolve to keep her warm. A sudden noise drew her attention: a group of street performers juggling fire. Children gathered, eyes wide, clapping in delight. Emma smiled faintly and crouched to help a little girl whose balloon had floated into the crowd. "Here," she said, handing it back. The girl's mother looked on with appreciation, and Emma felt that quiet warmth of connection ripple through her chest. Across the street, Alex shifted his weight. He had moved closer, pretending to read a newspaper while his gaze never left her. He recalled a memory from 10 years earlier, when his first business partner had betrayed him for millions, leaving him to rebuild a crumbling empire from scratch. Trust had become a currency he hoarded, a skill he rationed. Yet Emma's simplicity, her instinctive acts of kindness, hinted at a power he couldn't measure: authenticity. She had no money, no power, only love, and yet that love drew him in like gravity. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, another reminder of unpaid bills. A shiver of anxiety passed through her. She remembered the night she had discovered Derek had emptied her bank account, lying about needing the money for an investment. She had cried in the dark. Her father's journal open on the table, his words etched into her memory: "The world will take everything. Keep your heart." She had survived, not because the world was kind, but because her heart had been strong. Alex's attention sharpened. He had seen people survive, yes, but he had never seen someone thrive emotionally while carrying so little materially. That was rare. He adjusted his cufflinks, the gold catching the sun, a sharp contrast to Emma's threadbare coat and worn shoes. His assistant had warned him, "She's just another poor girl, boss. Don't get distracted." But Alex knew better. Something about her presence tugged at a part of him long dormant: a curiosity, a fascination, a question he could not ignore. Emma crossed the street toward her next errand. Stepping carefully around puddles, a man pushed past roughly, and instinctively, she steadied a woman who had nearly fallen. "Thank you," the woman said, eyes shining. Emma smiled faintly, murmuring, "Always." It was a small gesture, and noticed by most, but Alex noted it, filing it away, fascinated by her patterned kindness, even when unseen, even when costly. Why did someone with nothing radiate strength so potent it drew the attention of a man with everything? How had her heart survived betrayal, hunger, and loneliness intact? And what would happen when her acts of love finally collided with the power and wealth of a man who had never known such purity? Emma's hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the door to her small apartment. The room was dim, lit only by the afternoon sun filtering through dusty blinds. Bills sat stacked on the counter, reminders of eviction, utilities past due, and a life teetering on the edge. She dropped her bag and sank onto the threadbare sofa, fingers brushing the worn pages of her father's journal. Each word seemed to whisper reassurance. Even in nothing, your heart is everything. Protect it. Give it freely. A knock at the door startled her. Peering through the peephole, she saw no one, only a small brown envelope on the welcome mat. She picked it up with cautious fingers, noting the faint smell of lavender that seemed oddly familiar. Her heartbeat quickened. Memories flooded back. Derek's betrayal, the coldness of an apartment emptied of hope, the silence of nights when she cried alone. But her mother's voice pierced through the haze. Kindness is the strength no one can take from you. Emma opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note. Meet me at the park bench near the fountain at noon tomorrow. No signature beyond the letter A. She frowned, suspicion rising. Who could it be? A stranger? A scam? Yet a small, inexplicable tug at her heart told her to go. Across town, Alex adjusted the cuff of his shirt as he walked past the boardroom, thinking about her. He recalled the first time he had noticed Emma, the girl with nothing, yet radiating a quiet courage that defied the rules of his world. Her kindness to a stray dog, her patience with the child in the street, the way she offered comfort without expectation, it all haunted him. He had spent years learning to calculate every relationship, yet she existed beyond his calculations. She was unpredictable. She was real. The next morning, Emma arrived at the fountain, the worn envelope clutched in her hand. She scanned the area, heart fluttering, eyes catching the sunlight reflecting off the surrounding buildings. Alex was already there, leaning casually against the stone railing. His presence was commanding yet oddly subdued, his tailored suit sharp, but his eyes softened as they met hers. You came, he said, voice calm, measured. I received your note, she replied cautiously. Who are you? Alex smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement crossing his face. Someone who's been watching. Don't worry, no business deal, no schemes, just curiosity. His gaze softened as he noted her threadbare coat and tired expression. I couldn't help noticing. Your heart. Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. Her life had taught her caution, mistrust, and skepticism. Yet there was something in his presence that stirred the memory of her father's lessons. Trust selectively, but never lose your heart. For the first time in months, Emma felt a shift, a mixture of suspicion, hope, and intrigue. Who was this man who carried the world in his hands yet seemed drawn to someone with nothing? And what would happen when her powerless, loving heart finally collided with his power, his wealth, and his curiosity? Emma walked briskly through the narrow alleys on her way back from the park, the envelope still clutched tightly in her hand. Her stomach grumbled in protest, but she had no time for food, not when rent was due tomorrow, and the notices piled like silent threats on her kitchen counter. She paused at a corner, hearing footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet street. A man stepped out from the shadows, a cigarette dangling from his lips, eyes dark and calculating. Evening, miss, he said, voice low. Looks like you're carrying something valuable. His hand gestured vaguely at her bag. Emma froze. Memories of Derek's deceit flashed in her mind, the way he had smiled as he took her savings, the lie that had left her bankrupt, abandoned, and trembling. Her father's words returned, firm and unwavering. Courage is doing the right thing, even when the world threatens to break you. Emma's fingers tightened around the envelope. I don't know what you mean, she said, trying to steady her voice. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but she refused to show fear. She had survived Derek, survived eviction notices, survived hunger, and she would survive this too. The man stepped closer, smirking. You're brave, I'll give you that. But bravery doesn't fill your pockets, sweetheart. Emma took a hesitant step back, scanning the alley for an escape route, when a sleek black car rolled to a sudden stop a few yards away. A door opened, and Alex stepped out, the afternoon sunlight glinting off his cufflinks. His presence was commanding yet calm, like a force the world itself had to acknowledge. Step away, he said, voice low but firm. The man hesitated, eyes flicking to the car, then back at Alex, whose gaze held a cold authority Emma had never seen. The man cursed under his breath and stepped back into the shadows. Emma's chest heaved with relief. Alex walked over to her, adjusting the cuff of his suit. Are you all right? He asked, concern flickering in his eyes. She nodded, struggling to catch her breath. "I think so." He offered her a hand, which she took cautiously. "You move through life with such courage," he said quietly. "But you're carrying too much on your own." His words weren't just observation, they were foreshadowing, hinting that he had been watching her struggles long before this moment. Aware of her daily battles with hunger, betrayal, and solitude, Emma's mind wandered back to her childhood, to nights when she had huddled in a corner of her small apartment. Father's journal open, writing down his lessons. Power may fail you. Wealth may abandon you. But a loving heart never loses its strength. She realized in that moment that Alex wasn't like Derek, wasn't like the world that had always tried to crush her spirit. He was different. Alex glanced at the envelope in her hand, curiosity and caution warring in his expression. "Whatever's in your hands, it's small, but I can see it matters," he said. His voice carried both a question and a promise, planting a seed that would grow into the collision of their worlds. Emma looked up at him, heart still racing, and whispered, "I don't know who to trust anymore." Alex's eyes softened, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the pull of a heart that was pure and broken and capable of shocking someone who had everything. "Then trust this," he said quietly. "For now, let it be enough that someone sees you for who you truly are." The next morning, Emma returned to the cafe where she worked, her steps slow but deliberate. The city was already awake, horns blaring, people rushing, a rhythm that seemed indifferent to her struggles. She tucked the envelope deep in her bag, reminding herself of the note. "Meet me at the park bench near the fountain at noon." Alex's words from yesterday lingered in her mind. "Let it be enough that someone sees you for who you truly are," as she handed a cup of coffee to a regular customer. Her gaze caught a glimpse of the black SUV parked just across the street. Alex was inside, pretending to read a newspaper, yet his eyes never left her. A shiver of unease ran through her, but it wasn't fear, it was curiosity. Why did a man with everything follow someone with nothing? Emma's mind drifted to memories she rarely allowed herself to revisit. Nights spent in the cold after Derek had vanished, leaving her penniless and alone. The dark alleyways where she had cried, clutching her father's journal, reading his words aloud to herself. "Love is your strength. Compassion your armor." It was those lessons that had kept her from becoming bitter. Even when the world had tried to break her, inside the cafe, she noticed a young boy struggling to reach a bag of pastries on a high shelf. Without hesitation, she stepped over and handed it to him, smiling. "Careful," she said, adjusting the bag so it wouldn't spill. The boy beamed. "Thank you." Alex watched from the street, noting every detail, the ease with which she moved through life despite hardship, the instinctive care she offered to strangers. He recalled his own childhood, raised in the shadow of his father's empire, where trust was rare and kindness was often exploited. He had learned early that power was currency, and love was a vulnerability to be hidden. Yet Emma's life, lived without pretense, challenged everything he had been taught. Later, Emma walked to a nearby park, the envelope burning in her bag. She paused by a bench where a homeless woman rested, shivering in the morning chill. Emma knelt and offered her scarf. "Here. It's not much, but it will help." The woman's eyes glistened with gratitude. "Bless you, dear," she whispered. Emma smiled faintly, her heart heavy yet full. Across the street, Alex's jaw tightened. He had spent decades testing people for loyalty, compassion, and integrity. Many had failed, many had taken advantage of his wealth and left scars. But Emma, she acted without thought of reward. Her love was raw and calculated and entirely genuine. He knew, in that moment, that her heart was something rare, something capable of shocking even someone like him, a billionaire with everything money could buy. Emma's phone buzzed, a reminder of her unpaid bills. She glanced at the notification, then at the children playing nearby, at the stray cats wandering in the grass, and whispered to herself, "I'll manage." "I always do." Alex watched, the subtle lines of concern softening on his face. He would not interfere openly, not yet, but her acts of love had already begun to pull at threads in his carefully constructed world. Threads that could unravel more than he expected. Why did a powerless heart command attention so effortlessly? How could someone with nothing create ripples that reached a man with everything? And what would happen when the worlds of love and wealth finally collided, sparking consequences neither could ignore? Emma stepped off the curb, clutching her bag tighter as the morning breeze whipped through the city streets. Her mind churned with where rent was due, the envelope from Alex still burned a hole in her bag, and the mounting bills reminded her that survival was always a battle. She paused outside a small grocery store, debating whether she could afford even the bare minimum for lunch. Memories surfaced unbidden. The night Derek had emptied her bank account, the apartment she had returned to, cold and silent, the empty refrigerator a mirror of her broken trust. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Love is my strength. I will not falter." Inside, she selected a few items, balancing them precariously in her arms. The young man behind the counter glanced at her with curiosity. "Rough morning?" he asked, handing her the change she hadn't counted properly. Emma smiled faintly, murmuring, "Just life, I guess." Outside, she didn't notice a black SUV slow to a stop across the street. Alex leaning slightly forward in his seat, observing, his mind replayed the moments he had witnessed, the way Emma offered her scarf to a shivering stranger. The small kindnesses that left a ripple he couldn't explain. He remembered his own past boardrooms filled with people pretending to care, manipulation disguised as concern, loyalty that vanished with a contract. Emma's acts of love, raw and uncalculated, challenged everything he had learned about power, control, and influence. He had to know, did she truly act out of heart, or was there some hidden motive? Emma exited the store, stepping into a puddle and nearly dropping her bag. A passerby smirked and muttered under his breath, but she only muttered back, "It's fine." She didn't yet know that Alex had already discreetly alerted a local friend, someone who could quietly assist without drawing attention, ensuring that she wouldn't face a dangerous encounter on her way home. It was subtle, invisible intervention, a test without her knowing, a foreshadowing of how their lives would soon intertwine. She continued down the street, her eyes catching a stray dog trapped near a busy intersection. Without hesitation, she darted forward, scooping the animal into her arms, ignoring the traffic behind her. "SHH, it's okay," she whispered, heart racing. Alex's jaw tightened as he watched. Her courage, her compassion, her selflessness, all with nothing to gain, was extraordinary. He realized this was why his curiosity had turned to fascination. This was not mere kindness. This was integrity, shaped by hardship, resilience, and a heart that had survived betrayal and loss intact. Emma reached a park bench and sat, exhausted but determined. The envelope still in her bag pulsed with promise, curiosity, and danger all at once. She remembered her father's journal, the passages she had memorized as a child. "A heart that gives when it is empty is the strongest of all. Protect it, nurture it, let it lead you." Alex stepped closer this time, confident enough to bridge the distance yet careful not to alarm her. "Emma," he called softly, his voice carrying the weight of both curiosity and authority, "I know life hasn't been fair, but you're not as alone as you think." Emma looked up, startled, eyes scanning for danger, then meeting his. For the first time, she realized that someone with everything, wealth, influence, power, was willing to risk attention, scrutiny, and the unknown to protect a powerless heart. Why was he here? How did someone with everything see so clearly what mattered? And what would happen when her acts of love collided directly with the power and wealth of a man who had never encountered such purity? Emma stood at the edge of the fountain, the envelope heavy in her bag, sunlight glinting off the water and throwing ripples across her face. She had arrived early, heart hammering with anticipation and fear. Memories of past betrayals, Derek's lies, empty promises, the cold apartment she had returned to clouded her mind. But her father's words anchored her, "Your heart is your compass. Even when you have nothing, it guides you." Across the square, Alex watched silently, hands folded behind his back, his presence commanding yet patient. He remembered the day he had first encountered Emma, the girl with nothing, yet somehow radiating a strength that no wealth could replicate. Her acts of kindness, her instinctive compassion, her courage in the face of a world that had stripped her bare, all of it had haunted him. He had followed her for weeks, carefully observing, testing, but never interfering directly. Until now. Emma shifted her weight, glancing at the people around her, street vendors hawking fruit, children laughing and chasing one another, a stray dog sniffing at a discarded wrapper. Her mind flicked to the small victories that had sustained her, helping a child retrieve a balloon, offering a coat to a shivering woman, feeding a hungry animal. Each act had seemed inconsequential in the moment, yet Alex had noted them all, each a thread connecting her powerless heart to the force he was only beginning to understand. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the fountain. A young man snatched a woman's purse and sprinted into the crowd. Without hesitation, Emma ran after him, shouting, "Stop! That's not yours." Her voice was loud, fearless, carrying the conviction of someone who had survived too much to be cowed. She darted between startled pedestrians, heart racing, instincts sharp. Alex's gaze sharpened. This was the moment he had been waiting for, not to save her, but to see the measure of her courage firsthand. As the thief faltered, tripping on the curb, Emma seized the purse and held it aloft. The woman ran forward, grateful tears in her eyes. Emma handed it back with a quiet, "Always do what's right." Alex stepped forward, finally revealing himself. "Emma," he called, voice calm yet powerful, drawing her attention. She froze, heart skipping. You've been following me?" she asked, disbelief tinged with suspicion. "I've been watching," Alex admitted, eyes softening. "Not to control, not to manipulate, but because no one with a heart like yours should be invisible in a world that prizes only wealth and power." Emma's mind raced. Her life had been a series of betrayals, hardships, and empty gestures. Could someone with everything truly see her, really see her for who she was? The envelope in her bag, the note signed it, suddenly made sense. Every small act, every gesture of love, had drawn the attention of someone who could change her life forever. "Why me?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the hum of the city. Alex stepped closer, hands relaxed but steady, presence both grounding and overwhelming. "Because you remind me that love is the one power money can't buy. And sometimes, a powerless heart is stronger than all the riches in the world." Emma's chest tightened. Could she trust this man? Could she believe that someone with everything would risk his world for hers? The fountain rippled between them, sunlight dancing across the surface, and for the first time in years, she felt the possibility of hope. Emma stood frozen at the fountain, the city's bustle fading into background hum. Alex's words echoed. Sometimes, a powerless heart is stronger than all the riches in the world. Her heart thudded, every lesson from her father and mother converging into this moment. She remembered nights of hunger, nights of betrayal, nights of aching loneliness, and yet, in all of it, she had acted out of love, not calculation, not expectation. Every act of kindness, every threadbare gesture of care, had brought her here. Alex extended a hand, not with authority, but with a quiet invitation. "Emma, I've watched you live with nothing, yet give everything. That's a strength few ever possess." His eyes softened, reflecting sunlight like liquid gold. "I want to offer you a chance to see what it's like to have someone watch over you, to protect you, to see your heart fully." Emma shook her head, disbelief shadowing her face. I can't accept you already have," Alex interrupted gently, glancing at the envelope she still clutched. The note, the meeting. It was never about money, never about charity. It was about seeing you, the real you. The heart that the world overlooked. His voice carried both honesty and awe, a recognition of her journey. Memories flooded her, Derek, taking everything she had worked for, leaving only emptiness. Her father, teaching her that love is never powerless. Her mother, whispering courage into her ear. Every small act of kindness, helping a child, feeding a stray, comforting a stranger, threads of a life that mattered even when no one seemed to notice. All of it had led to this, the moment her powerless, loving heart confronted a man with everything. Alex stepped closer, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability behind his wealth, behind his power. He had never trusted easily, had never let anyone in, had always calculated and controlled. Yet here he was, captivated, almost shaken, by the purity of her heart. "Emma, your love," he said softly, "it's changed the way I see the world. It's changed me." Her lips trembled. "I've survived by holding on to love, even when it hurt, even when it left me with nothing," she whispered. "I don't know if I can trust someone with everything." "You can," Alex replied, reaching for her hand again. This time, she didn't resist. Because love, even a powerless heart, can be stronger than all the power in the world. A hush fell over the fountain as a stray dog patted nearby. Children laughed in the distance, and sunlight danced across the rippling water. Emma's chest swelled with the weight of everything she had endured. And for the first time, hope wasn't a fragile thing, it was real. Palpable doubt the envelope, the note, the silent observations. The subtle interventions all had been pieces of a puzzle neither could have imagined. Alex, the billionaire with everything, and Emma, the girl with nothing but love, finally stood face to face, worlds colliding not with force, but with understanding, recognition, and mutual respect. "Are you ready?" Alex asked gently. Emma looked at him, then at the fountain, the city, the small acts of love that had carried her through life. And finally, she nodded, "Yes, I'm ready." And in that moment, a powerless heart shocked a billionaire, not with rebellion, not with ambition, but with the enduring, unshakable power of love.